I'll just talk for a little bit, and then so the bulk of the session will be Heather Farmer, Dr. Farmer, telling you about HRS. So I am here. Let me click off. I understood that, you know, it's recorded. That's what it told me. So I'll just give you a brief, and I do mean quick and brief. Um, those things sometimes are synonymous, but we're in academia, so they're not always. So yeah, here we go. And now I just put all your faces in front of my presentation. Bear with me. All right, so hopefully everyone sees this. Um, I don't know who's heard of ICPSR, hopefully all or most of you. So I'll just do a quick little review. Yeah, so if you haven't, you know, we're a data archive housed at the University of Michigan. We've been around since the 60s, so that's a fair amount of time. We're focused on social and behavioral sciences broadly. We started out with lots of surveys, political science data. Now we have all sorts of data. So as the social sciences expanded, so did we. Um, you can download data directly. There's also restricted data. So public use data versus restricted use data. The restricted use data, you have to enter into some agreement with us. So it's really so your institution on behalf of you, enter into an agreement with the University of Michigan on behalf of us, and it's around data security and protections and everything like that. Um, you know, why use secondary data? Mostly it's because these data are already collected and collecting data is expensive. So, you know, why why reinvent the wheel? But also it's so expensive that a lot of us don't have, the money or resources to do what collaborations can do, and what existing studies can do. Um, Pre-2024, and I think this is still the case, just there are some things that happen. The government, the US government was really great for giving out and providing data, particularly health data. Um, some of those data are in various stages of availability. ICPSR, though, has been a big player in downloading those data, particularly around January 25th, 2025, just randomly that day, um, with saving government data. So we still have those data. So you can come and either just look at the data that way and or, if you wanted to see possibly what might have changed from what's up now or back up now to what we have, stuff like that, that's something to remember. Um, Getting to the data. So I am not explaining this. I'm just letting you know that because this is focused on the health and retirement study, if you go to ICPSR to find the health and retirement study, we're going to kick you out to this page, which is the website of the health and retirement study. And so, yeah, around that, though, we have some data that's connected to that through some of our holdings. You'll see here, this would be our link. And then we have linking contextual data measurement, a module around culture and arts, and then another aggregating variables one through this linkage library. So there you go. Those are just some of our holdings. This also shows you what our web page looks like for search results. So you can go in there, do your standard types of search, stuff like that. Um, yeah, and this is just an example of the study homepage. So what you get when you do that, you see your data and documentation, but you will see your publications. This is a good way when you have a publication from some of these data to let us know so that we can link it to the data set and then people can find your publications that way and people can know. It's also a good way for you to search to find out what people have already done. Um, yep. We also have a summer program in quantitative methods. Uh, this is a busy page, but I'm trying to get everything in. It's like a stat summer camp. So people come here. It's also hybrid, so you can stay where you are and learn about, get a brush up on new stats procedures, new, or if you don't, if it's not new, get a refresher, stuff like that. All sorts of courses, scholarship opportunities, 3-week courses, workshops. Some of them you can get sponsored or they're paid for by like an agency. Sometimes Robert Wood Johnson has paid for participation, so they're competitive. If you want to connect with us, you can get on our YouTube channel. You can get on social media. We have a data brunch podcast. We have videos. Don't really ask questions right now, but later, feel free to. And so, yeah, I think I'm done because I said I was going to be quick and brief, and I like to keep to those promises.
Thank you so much, David. And David, if anyone has ICPSR questions, have we said how folks can contact you?
I'll put my email address in the chat.
Beautiful.
That'd be a great way to contact me.
Okay,
Um,
sounds
and
good.
I'll even say the better ways to contact me.
Okay, great. All right, Dr. Farmer, would you like to take it away?
I sure will. Okay, so let me just get my slides up. Can you see my slides?
We can see them. They're not in slideshow form yet,
Okay, then I
like
think I'm on the wrong
presentation mode.
screen. I'm really bad at doing this.
Oh, it's okay.
Let's see. Got to figure out which screen I need to share. Let's put this in slideshow mode and then I can see if I can. Okay, so let me see if this, can you see my screen here? Can you see it there?
Yes, it
That's
looks
good.
great.
Okay. Okay. And so thanks for inviting me. Hi, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. And I'm here to talk to you about the health and retirement study because it's my favorite thing ever in my research world. So I am an interdisciplinary scholar, like pretty much everyone in MeWe. I went to Penn State. I got my PhD in biobehavioral health, and I do a lot of research on older adult populations. I want to understand social stratification of health, what's going on with those processes, especially understanding stress and coping and the physiological mechanisms that contribute to health and well-being in older folks. And so that's part of why I'm here today because I love working with the HRS. It's my data set. It's my favorite. I worked almost exclusively with it for just over a decade now. I was trying to calculate the time and it's weird to think how long I've been working with it. But it is something that I know a lot about and have published quite extensively with. And so I'm super excited to share this with you. And I made memes just for this presentation. I hope that you understand the amount of effort that went into that and the criticism I received from my husband. Anyways, so I really love working with the HRS, and there are a lot of reasons. This is just a brief summary of some of those reasons. But what I think most helpful is that they have the best resources. They have documentation, they have user guides, they have something for just about any question you have. They even have like a welcome to the HRS for newbies where they walk you through how to kind of understand it. They have lots of information on the sample design, the recruitment efforts, just about any question you have, they have the answer and they've published it on their website so you can find it pretty quickly and easily. They even have statistical code to just help you get started because they want people to use the data. Um, Pertaining to the research that a lot of us do in MeWe, we're interested in disparities. So what I think is really great is that in addition to this being a national sample, they also oversample populations, including Black and Hispanic adults. On top of that, the RAND Corporation has also poured through all of the HRS data over 2 decades worth of data, by the way. And they created user-friendly files with similar naming conventions. So you don't have to look through all of the raw data sets to see has the wording changed or what is this variable. They've made things a lot easier. If the missingness in one way was they changed up how they set their missingness, the RAND Corporation has taken care of that for us and made our lives as researchers easier so that we can move into the data analysis phase much faster. In addition, they construct variables. So instead of us having to take all of this information and figure out how to create a variable for wealth or for income, RAND's like, I got you. And they went and they created that for us. And that makes it easier for us as researchers, and it's trustworthy. What I also really love is that HRS collects data not just from respondents, but also from the individuals in their household. I've been using those data to conduct dyadic analysis to look at relationships between married couples. And I think that is a really great plus because this is an amazing resource. I love the HRS because they collect data on all sorts of different topics. The data have been collected since the 1990s, like 1992. And there's a lot of biopsychosocial data within the HRS. There is a psychosocial questionnaire, which is constantly getting new measures added. They're using some of the most well-established, like validated measures to capture psychosocial well-being. They also collect biomarker and physical measures as well. And this is a data set that has been circulating for a very long time. As I mentioned, it's been around since 1992. And so there's tons and tons of research out there on the HRS. And because data is ongoing, data collection efforts are continuing until this day. That means that there's always something new that we can ask. There's always something new we can learn. And especially with HRS bringing in new measures, they just added venous blood samples on top of dried blood sample data, which, they're constantly being innovative and thinking about the needs of the older adult population and what researchers need to study. In addition to all of those pluses, the data set is publicly available. And that means that all you have to do is you just sign up and you can download a bunch of the data right away and get to work. The registration is super quick. The HRS is the GOAT, okay? You're not going to find something that is quite as well documented, at least in my experience. I've never seen anything that is quite like the HRS. Their website is Chef's Kiss. They collect data on 20,000+ people in the United States and the individuals in their households. They collect this data every 2 years. So starting in 1992 and follow up with people. Now, recognizing that it's a group of people 50+ and we're collecting data over time, the HRS also refreshes their sample with new birth cohorts every 6 years. They have health data, they have family level data, they have health behaviors, financial data, just about anything you can think of. The HRS probably has something pretty close, if not exactly what you want. And what I especially appreciate is that they collect physiological data, which is what I have worked with quite a bit. So I've worked with their biomarkers that includes inflammation and blood pressure, measurements from the physical measure data. I've worked with quite a bit of the HRS. So when you go to the HRS website, you're going to see something like this when you click on the data products section. And this is only a snapshot of what you would actually have access to, because this is just telling us these are the broad categories where we have data. If you click on any one of these links, there's so much more than this can even convey. But what I want to draw your attention to is on this left-hand column. These are going to be the tools that you have access to right away after you register. And the registration button is down here. All you have to do is just fill out a short form, just like you would with signing up for access to emails from Target or whatever. You put in your email address, your name or whatever, and voila, you have access to the HRS data. And the data sets are, they have this public survey data, which is I'll talk about shortly, but then they also have the RAND products, which I mentioned, which has cleaned up and made our lives so much easier. Brand has really, they are a dream come true. They have really made our lives so much simpler. But there's a lot of really cool projects. The HRS even shares projects that researchers have shared with them and said, hey, you can put this on your website and share it with anyone who wants to use this data or use the code that I've used for this project. So there are contributed projects from other researchers who use HRS for their own purposes that you can use. In this middle column here, what you see are the variables you can access that are restricted or sensitive. What sensitive means is that there is some sort of private information. The biomarkers fall into that category. You have to have an additional level of security clearance basically to access those data, but it's really, really quick and easy. I want to say that you can generally, after you fill out the form to access the sensitive data, within a week or so, you'll get an email with all this information and all of this like passwords and stuff so you can access those files, but it's very, very quick and easy. The restricted data has even more steps to go through. I've actually never used the restricted data on my own, but there's a number of other processes in place to make sure that participant data is protected. And so there's just so much you can work with. And then the HRS is always good about just telling you, hey, do you need to learn more? Are we overwhelming you? Do you need to learn anything? Here's some additional information for you to learn about whatever it is you might need. Merging files, for example, because the HRS releases data in waves. So if you need to access or you're looking to register for those data, it's free, it's easy. Just go to hrs.isr.umich.edu and click on that data products tab, and then it brings you down to that page that I just showed you. But the HRS wants people to use their data. They love it. They're so excited. So they made it a million times easier for us to use their data by giving us user guides. They have published all sorts of things. Like I mentioned, there's statistical code. They have information on how to manage your data, how to merge files, how to create new variables, because they want to make this process easy and as painless as possible so that we can publish with it and so that the HRS can continue getting information or getting information and also continue their funding. So it's a very popular data set, especially in the aging world. And I think for anyone really, because I oftentimes have students who I work with here, and I'm the only gerontologist. They don't really have an interest in aging, but the topics I think can be relevant to anyone, regardless of the age of the population you're working with. So I love the HRS. They're the best. And once you get into the HRS website, there's all sorts of tabs. You can kind of play around with it. One of the things that I think is really interesting, I don't personally use it. I have ADHD and I can't really handle all the information. So when I went to screenshot this for the presentation, I got overwhelmed and I was like, let's make a meme about that. So I'm going to create a questionnaire guide that is so detailed. This is only part of the page. But if you scroll down, basically what HRS does is they show you all the different topical areas where they have collected data on their surveys. And then across all of the waves, they tell you what section of the HRS that this is placed in. If you click those letters for each of those different sections, what it will do is it will actually bring you to the data and the code books that the HRS has so that you can look at what they collect data on. So this is a lot, but I think that everyone has their own style and preferences for how they like to learn about a new data set. And if you're not sure what you're looking for, maybe you just browse through this to figure out where you want to go. But I think this could be helpful for some people, maybe not everyone. One of the resources that I've already talked about a bit is RAND. The RAND files are some of the best aspects of the HRS for me on top of the data that exists because RAND has made it easy for people who are new to HRS or unfamiliar or maybe even new to quantitative data and secondary data that they have these wave specific data sets that they provide. And if you click on the data products, there's a whole link for RAND. And what I did is I screenshot what that looks like. And you see that these waves, they provide a different data set for every single wave. But then they also have what is called the longitudinal file. This is where they take the gold, right? This is where I really like it because it's this massive file. As it suggests, it's longitudinal. What they did is they extracted some of the most popular, most commonly used variables from the HRS. And from the very beginning, wave one, all the way up until present day, they have aggregated all of those variables into one single data set, and they've streamlined your work because they made sure all the variables are named the same exact way. They have notes about the variable names, how the wording has changed. It's this 1,000 page, like literally over 1,000 page document that goes with this, but it's easy to search and it's so comprehensive. It makes our lives as researchers easier. I start here pretty much anytime I work on a study because most of the variables I want to use, I can find in this longitudinal data set. If I can't, then I start branching out into the other data, the data files that are wave specific. They call them FAT files. And so what you see in the slide here is that the HRS has this very specific, wave specific information. We have household level data, spouse level data, respondent level data. What RAND did is they made this naming convention that simplifies all of that for us. So in this longitudinal file, they have the variable name will start with an R if it's respondent level, S if it's spouse level, HH level if it's household level. They numerically code those variables based on the wave number. And then they have a variable name that is intuitive. It's not just like, LB220 or whatever. It's, R8 HIBP for respondent level high blood pressure measure at wave 8 or 2006. So I think that helps make things a lot easier. And especially when I'm working with students who are unfamiliar with secondary data or, kind of don't know what they're doing with the HRS, I say, look at this data set first and kind of see if there's some measures in there you want to work with. Then I also love the psychosocial, the physical, and biomarker data. These are collected in a special kind of process. The HRS recognized that it needed to include more psychosocial measures. They wanted to expand their data collection to include physiological and physical measures, but also knew that doing so could potentially add to the respondents' burden. They were already asking a lot of them. So their solution was to split their sample into two, subsample A and B, and then ask them to provide this additional information every 4 years, and these two groups would rotate. So in 2006, they started collecting data on psychosocial and physical measures from half the sample, the other half collected in 2008, and then each sample is followed every 4 years afterwards. So we still have longitudinal data from the sample, but it's not collected every wave to make it easier for respondents. So there's so much to work with. The physical measures include things like grip strength, waist circumference, blood pressure measurements, pulse. The biomarkers initially started out with just a couple of around 6 measures, I want to say it was, and that lasted from 2006 to 2016. In 2016, HRS switched over to collecting physiological data using a venous blood draw, and that allowed us to get a lot more data on so many more biomarkers than I couldn't even begin to list them out, but a huge array. And I don't think they're being used that much. So lots of opportunities here to conduct biopsychosocial research. So my case study comes from a project that I published in Stigma and Health just last year. What I did is I recognized that there's a lot of research on discrimination and blood pressure. Most of it's really all over the place, though. The findings are mixed. Some studies are like discriminations associated with worse blood pressure, so higher blood pressure. Some are like discriminations associated with lower blood pressure. Some studies say there's no relationship here at all. On top of that, there's a lot less out there on discrimination and blood pressure in older adults, nor have the studies really focused on whether this association differs across race or gender or race and gender subgroups. So I wanted to understand whether discrimination was tied to age-related changes in blood pressure and whether this association was conditional on race and gender combinations. So the first thing I did is I went to this resource in the HRS called Question Concordance. And this is something that I think is really valuable if you're new to HRS and if there's something in particular you really want to study. So what you can do on this question concordance is you go into this and there's a little search bar and you can type in keywords and it'll tell you if the HRS has any measures across any of the waves and what those measures look like. So if you're interested in sleep, you might type in sleep. If you're interested in blood pressure or hypertension or discrimination, right? So you can type in any of those keywords and HRS will populate whatever variables tie into that. I have a student that was interested in housing insecurity, and so she used this tool to find out if there were any measures that she could potentially use on a project. So it'll give you a great amount of information. You can narrow it down if, for example, you're like me and you're like, well, I want to work with the physiological measures, and those were only introduced into the HRS from 2006 and beyond. So I might check off boxes for the waves that are 2006 and beyond. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach using this tool. One of the other features of the concordance that I think is extremely valuable is that if you were to find a measure on, I typed in blood pressure here. I typed in systolic blood pressure. And what I did is it came up with, hey, in 2022, we have this variable for systolic blood pressure. And in the search bar, or right under the search bar, there is a section called XREF. And what that does, if you click on it, is it will show you this very large panel. And this indicates to us is that the variable for systolic blood pressure wasn't included. We didn't have measures until 2006. But after that point, we have information on systolic blood pressure at every wave in the core aspect of the survey. And these are the variable names at each wave. Again, making our lives easier. We don't have to go searching for blood pressure because if we find the measure we want to use and we want to find out if this measure is present across other waves and if what the variable name is, HRS can give that to you using this tool. So that's one of the first things I'll do. Another resource that the HRS has that I oftentimes use and have students, I recommend to students, is their online bibliography. What they do is anyone who's publishing using the HRS, those papers are automatically populated into this resource. You click on the Media and Publications tab, you find the online bibliography, and again, you just type in keywords. If you look here, I typed in discrimination blood pressure. I'm a word vomit type of person. I just toss in words and I see what happens. And what you see is that it shows me papers that have been published using HRS that includes those keywords, one of which is the paper I'm talking about right now. So as you see, there were only 8 results, that told me that this isn't something that's been studied often with the HRS. And that was something that I used in my literature review. So I oftentimes rely on this tool to help me see if my research question has been asked before. Am I doing something that's already been done? Or I will use this tool to help me find studies if I'm trying to figure out how I want to analyze my data, how I want to construct my measures, or if I have questions about how other people have approached any of the variables I'm working with. So this is one gift that the HRS is also giving us. Um, and I talk really fast, so please let me know if I'm going too fast. What I have next is just for my paper. So what I did is I drew data from 2006 to 2018, and I pulled data from the core, and those are the data collection that happens every 2 years. And there were a lot of data that I extracted using those core interviews throughout the study period. I also pulled the Leave Behind questionnaire, so that contains the psychosocial measures, and I used everyday discrimination from that. Then I also pulled from the physical measures data, and I found that in the public survey files. And that's where I found my blood pressure measures. And I conducted growth curve models to look at these relationships between discrimination and age-related trajectories of blood pressure. But how did I get there? Well, and I have an 8-year-old, so I am going to be using some K-pop Demon Hunters references. I do not apologize at all. That movie is great, and I listen to the soundtrack very regularly. Um, fun, very unrelated fact. On my Unwrapped on Spotify, K-pop Demon Hunters came up on the top of my list, and children's music was one of my number one genres. So what I did to get here is I first I come up with like an idea of what are the variables I need to conduct my analyses. And then I go and I find the data sets that I will need within the HRS that contains those. So I went and for me, I already have all these data sets, but you need to make sure you have the right data sets. HRS creates those for you. They generally have them prepared in Stata, SPSS, and SAS formats. And a lot of software, you can download one of these and import it into a different one. So if you use R or something else, you can still use the files. But essentially, you're going to want to download whatever it is you need and then merge them together. So for me, I downloaded my core data sets. I started out with this longitudinal RAND file because it had most of everything I needed in it. But then I also had to find these wave specific files to get my psychosocial measures because the RAND longitudinal file has some, but not a lot of the psychosocial measures. And then I actually had to go into the individual surveys to download the physical measures. But after you get those files downloaded, you merge them all together based on the unique identifier assigned to that respondent. Then you get to work. You start coding, you start cleaning up the data and do what you need. As you're doing that, though, you might come across questions like, oh, I have these discrimination items. I'm not really sure. Do they come from a scale? What are these? How should I code them? How does the HRS set them up? And so I bring you to this next resource. It's called the questionnaire. They have lots of different documentation for pretty much every single major content area within the study. For the psychosocial measures, we have this code book, and it's called the Psychosocial and Lifestyle Questionnaire. And you see it's aggregated across all waves. And so you go into this, and it's extremely comprehensive. It starts out with this background section that tells you all about the setup of the data. And then you get into the good stuff. You get into the actual measures, and they go question by question for the measures that are included as part of this psychosocial questionnaire. And they give you background on the measure. They give you the items. They tell you how the items are coded in the HRS. Then they also provide recommendations for how you should code and create your variable, like if reverse coding is needed, and they tell you the Cronbach's alpha. And I have never seen anything like this. a colleague asked me to work on another project with a non-HRS data set. I got into it and I was like, where are your code books? Where is your documentation? And my colleague was like, what? No one does stuff like the HRS. No one has this level of detail. It's amazing. So let me show you, okay? So for my study, I wanted to use the discrimination measure. I looked into this file, I typed in discrimination in the search bar. It brought me to the measure, right? So what we see here is that it was question 29 or 30, depending on the wave. They change things up over time. But it gives you a description of like, this is what that measure captures. And then it tells you it was a follow-up. We started out with this, we added in this additional item in 2008, da 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 da. But they give you some background on that particular item. Then, right under that, they tell you, hey, do you need to cite this measure? This is what you need to use. Who does this? Then they're like, okay, and here's what the items look like. Here's the specific wording, and this is the question that they were asked, and they responded to these specific items. Then, on top of that, because HRS is just, they work their magic, they tell you, hey, if you're looking to create a measure based off these items, here's our recommendation. And they tell you, you're going to want to create an index, you're going to reverse code the items, and then you're going to average them. If you have a lot of missingness, here's how you might want to approach that. And then finally, they provide wave-specific psychometric data. Come on now. I don't know how. It's so comprehensive, but it is, and I love it because of that. So as you see another K-pop Demon Hunter, but it's like, yes, like you get this great data and it makes your life so much easier. My productivity did not slow down during the pandemic because the HRS is where it's going on. They have all this set up. So my life was just simple and easy, and it continues to be. And I think I have this like inherent fear of not using the HRS because I don't want to think about how hard it is to work with data where they're not so organized, where I don't have all the information at my fingertips. But I think that HRS has lots of strengths because of the resources they provide for the any investigators. So when I wanted to get my blood pressure data similar to the Leave Behind questionnaire, I went and I found this documentation guide for the physical measures. And this is where I learned more about how blood pressure was collected from the HRS standpoint. It tells you lots of information on the measurements. So what kind of blood pressure cuff they used, what brand, they tell you about their protocols, what they told respondents. Basically, I learned they have respondents sit down, they put a blood pressure cuff on the left arm, they repeat their measurements every 45 seconds, right? So you get lots of comprehensive data that help you write your paper and understand what was going on for your measures. And then that allowed me to write and publish this cool study where I looked at how these relationships were operating across age, by race and by gender. And so I found some really cool trajectories that were distinct for Black men versus white men, and distinct trajectories for white women versus Black women. And this gave me a lot of really, really cool information that has allowed me to expand my research in awesome ways. Right now, I'm using HRS to do dyadic research, where I'm using the spouse level data, so respondents and their spouses, to understand if stress exposure is contagious and generates loneliness, not just for the person who's experienced discrimination, but whether there's an impact from vicarious exposure to discrimination, generating more loneliness for both individuals. So there's so much you can do with the HRS, and it is the GOAT in all of the ways. So I love it. I always advocate for using the HRS. I'm happy to answer questions if you have specifics. I have a lot more detail on like other special data sources beyond this if you want them, but I wanted to give you time for Q&As. feel free though, ask questions. You can express your concerns about my own well-being and my use of outdated memes. My husband has really reminded me that I am using very outdated material. Or you can just email me if you ever have a question. I've had people say, reach out to me with an email saying, hey, I'm trying to use this discrimination measure and I'm getting these extraordinarily high levels of missingness. And I'm like, oh, there's a skip pattern. Did you account for that? Did you look at whether people were eligible for the leave behind? Did you look at whether they actually completed it or stopped partially through? So I get these questions actually quite regularly because I've worked with the HRS a lot. And I'm always happy to help someone out, give feedback, or even if you're like, I want to get involved in your work, let's do some collaborations, like bring it on. Anyways, that's all I have. But thanks for having me here, and I can answer questions, or I guess I'll turn off the sharing mode if I can figure that out. Uh, see, this is where it's like I can do a lot of things, but who knows? Thank you.
I did it. Well, thank you so much, David and Heather. I think it's time for questions. So let's open the floor. And if you want to turn your cameras on, that might be fun, but no pressure. It just makes it a little easier to, have a conversation.
Yeah, I have a question. Sorry if I missed this. I My dog was freaking out during part of it, so I had to leave for a little bit. But is there any place on the website for looking at like previous papers that have been published using this data set so you can make sure you're not duplicating
A
like
hundred
results?
thousand percent, yes.
Okay,
So
cool.
if you go to the website, there's actually like a media and publications tab at the top. There's a section within that called online bibliography, and it's searchable. You don't
Oh,
even, once you publish with the HRS, you don't even have to send it to them. They just automatically populate any papers that have HRS. So you can search within that. And I gave an example. I typed in discrimination blood pressure, and it came up with eight results within that, and I could look through and see who else has been working with it, how they've approached the research questions, if my question has been addressed. Because with a large data set like this, it's been around a while. You're bound to find times where you've asked a question that's already kind of been answered, and you might need to go back to the drawing board a bit. But I also use that tool to find other papers to inspire me, to help me figure out exactly how I want to maybe think about measuring a variable or what the design was for a given study. When I was starting to get into work on more multimorbidity, for example, I was like, I wonder how people have measured multimorbidity in the HRS. And so I used that tool and I kind of allowed my literature review to kind of start there so that I could see how people were assessing multimorbidity in the HRS. And it ended up being really helpful because then when I was writing papers, I can cite those papers as well. I'm like, hey, others have used HRS for the similar type of reason. And, so I think that it's really, really helpful to have that tool.
yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. This is so helpful and informative. I have two questions. One is that as I was using At Health, which is also a kind of a sister study of HRS, but they start at a younger age. I always got these reviewer comment. They complain how old the data is, and I wonder whether you have come across those review comments and how do you address them? The second question is about weight. Like weight is a big thing at health, and I wonder how does that play a role in HRS?
So weight as in like a
Weight
person's
variable.
weight, or do you mean
Oh,
like survey weights?
survey weight, survey
Okay,
weight.
okay, okay. I just want to make sure. So for your first question, I have occasionally come into questions about like the data, like the way if I'm collecting them, but I generally haven't run into too many issues because I've been working with data that are less often used or not used in the same way. And that's one of the reasons that I oftentimes will draw on multiple waves. So my study that I presented findings for, it was 2006 all the way up until 2018. I used as much data as I had access to because that was also really helpful for me to like increase like my sample size, make sure I had a nice follow-up range. So I think that those are some ways to kind of alleviate the concerns by having, um, you know, an analysis that presents like unique research questions, even if the data are a little older. But I don't know, I haven't really encountered too much of pushback in terms of the age of the data. As for the survey weights, sometimes I will use them, but I oftentimes don't. What I do instead is I adjust for the same variables that are used to generate the weights. Some of the procedures and data are not compatible with some of those survey commands that are recommended to produce like national level like estimates. But one of the things that I've learned, especially when I was in my postdoc, was that your estimates really aren't going to change all that much. It's just a little bit more precision that you're able to get from that. So it didn't actually impact my work very much at all. And I generally haven't used the survey weights, the stratification, clustering variables all that often, because it gets extra complicated, especially when you're working across lots of different waves and there's all these skip patterns, and then that impacts your ability to use some of those. I use multiple imputation, and so there's like layer upon layer of complexity. They're not always congruent with those survey variables. And so what I do is when I'm writing my paper, I will just have a note that says, we did not use these, or I'll say like we adjusted for the complex design of the survey using da 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 variables in line with other work. And there's this paper by, I want to say it's Scott Lynch and others that have published extensively comparing analyses using the weights and using those clustering and stratification variables versus adjusting for the weights, whatever. And the estimates are really not drastically different. So I cite those sources to kind of support that. And if pretty much any study I've published where I haven't used those variables, I have a citation. So you can always just type my name in Google Scholar and find them pretty quickly. I oftentimes do that myself if I forget. I'm like, well, who did I cite for that? Let me just quickly look at what I did.
Hey, thank you so much. Very, very helpful.
Yeah. So the paper survey weights using various. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Like,
will use that for my argument too in the future.
yeah, I generally, and sometimes I will have reviewers say something like you need to include these, and I will have cited these resources because it's not always possible to do, and I don't want people to feel like that's the end all be all. Like the data are the data. It doesn't, it's that's the truth of it. So I'm just right now I'm going into Google Scholar and I'm finding my own name. So yeah, but it's possible. You don't have to use the weights. They're helpful, and it's really helpful, especially if you want to make these like claims that these are generalizable to the older adult population. And so that's important. But that's not always my focus. And sometimes I'm slicing and dicing the HRS data in ways where it doesn't help to have that approach. But yeah, I can find these. Let me see if I can find them for us. But yeah, and I did mention I have ADHD, so I'll be really bad about dividing my attention, even though I took my medication today. So feel free to, I may end up just sharing that after the
If you
fact.
want to just email it to me, I
Yeah,
can send it
I
out.
think that might be a good approach.
Perfect.
So I don't
Yep.
spend too much time. I might like click on
Googling.
something and be like, oh wait, who cited me there? And then get distracted. Like it's a thing. I will do it. What other questions do we have? And not just for me, David is here too, and David can answer questions if you have them as well. I attended an ICPSR Summer Institute, and like I learned about group-based trajectory modeling, and it was really, really cool. It was so intimate because it was a virtual session, and there were only a handful of us. We got to ask all these questions for like one of the big names who like helped create this procedure. It was really cool.
No other burning questions here, it seems.
I just found some of the stuff folks were asking about. Here's my paper that I'm linking at the bottom, and I cite some other papers that have done this, and then I have this Winship and Radville paper that I've used as well. Um,
Right. Um, I have another question, but I don't want to take up the time if others are interested. Yeah, so you mentioned when download the data, it has these three different formats, data, SAS, and SPSS. I'm just wondering, what's your workflow? Which software do you prefer to use for data cleaning and analyzing HRS?
yeah. So I mean, I started out in grad school working with SAS, with through my advisor's recommendation. I learned SPSS in my coursework. But it wasn't until, and I struggled with it because I felt like HRS is, I don't know, big and complex, and I just wasn't really liking those approaches. So I took some demography courses and ended up learning about Stata, and I've never looked back ever since then. I love Stata. I especially like the do files because a lot of my colleagues work with Stata as well. We share do files and say like, "Hey, here's how I set that up," or a professor. She had said you should use multiple imputation, and I said, I can't even begin to fathom how I would do that in SAS. And she was like, here's my do file. Do you have Stata? Like, I love using Stata for that reason. And I think Stata is just a superior program. No offense to any other programs. Like, I get R is free, and I think that's a big draw of it. But I cannot for the life of me, like my brain cannot figure out R. I tried, I downloaded like this thing that's supposed to help me learn R better. And I could not stick with it. Like Stata, my friends that I do research, my colleague friends, I don't know, they will text me sometimes to be like, I'm getting this error message. And I can just text them back without even Googling it because I know Stata so well. I'm like, it's just this thing. Because my colleagues work with HRS. So I'm like, oh no, it's just this thing. You just got to add this here, or you just got to do this because data is just, for me, it's intuitive. It feels right for me. And so I haven't switched to anything else. If you give me SAS code, I'll probably like throw up a little bit because I do not like SAS. But like I really love Stata. But I don't have any other problems. What I liked about Stata is that what I had in SAS, I would write maybe 8 lines of code. I could do it in 1 line of code using Stata. And I was like, oh my gosh, have I really been doing all this work? And SAS was like convoluted. It's just like things didn't always make sense with Stata. It's intuitive. It's easy to figure out. I can write my own code in my sleep and I love it. Cannot, I cannot function with SAS. And I thought I hated research. Like I thought I hated analyses. I thought I hated coding. I didn't think it was meant for me until I learned Stata and I realized Stata was what I needed. SAS and I were not compatible. We were not a match. So I think it was that I just yeah, SAS was like David saying it, we did not go well together. As soon as I picked up Stata, and you can get a perpetual license so that it never expires. And so I just get one license. I never have to pay for it ever again. It's great. And when you talk to colleagues, you can just share a do file. And it's so simple. And I just love it. Whereas in Stata, it's like, oh, or SAS, it's like, oh gosh, let me show you what I think I did and hope that it's right. I don't really know what I'm doing here. It's a whole thing. But I judge no one for their choices. It's just I recognize my own needs and Stata is where it's at.
Well, we are at the end of the hour. So thank you so much Heather
Mhm.
and David, this was fantastic. We will be sharing the recording out. And if you guys are open to it, I'll also share your slides.
Mhm.
Okay, great. If you could email me those maybe.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was fantastic. And we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to chat with anyone with any questions. Feel free, reach out. As you can see, I'm an open book. I'm a yapper and I like to help. So I'm here. Great to see you all.
Great to see you. Bye bye.